You're not even interested in treating the other person as a person. You just want to put an identity on the other person.
Do we have the courage to gently go up to someone to just put forth a good request?
You don't have to like everything, but what do you have to tell me?
There is obviously a category of trolls, right? Where I just like to say things to get a reaction. And the more you react, the more I react, or the more I enjoy myself.
It's harder to feel combative against someone when you find more similarities with them.
Every time I scroll on social media, there's a new video of someone arguing, ranting, or people shoving or yelling at each other. Is it just me, or do people seem angrier these days? And is there anything we can do to make our interactions and conversations less heated and more productive? Today on The Usual Place, I have Kuik Shiao-Yin, who is the founder of Common Ground Civic Centre and Consultancy and a cultural change strategist. Now, she's also a former nominated MP. Thank you for coming on the show. And next to her on the couch, I have Audrey Low, and she's the founder of leadership consultancy Designing Trust and an ICF-PCC performance coach. Now, she's also the co-host and producer of the Curious Co podcast. Thank you very much for being on the show, both of you. And we're going to get into this conversation. But before we get there, I need to ask you to each tell me what a culture change strategist is and what an ICF-PCC performance coach is. So maybe, Sharon, you want to tell me what that means?
Sure. I know, like culture change strategist sounds very cheem, but in simple English, it just means that I help people and their organizations take a look at what is working and what is not working in their culture, which is basically beliefs and behaviors. And there's usually a preferred belief and behavior. So we talk about like, all right, what realistically, how do you close that gap?
And Audrey, what is an ICF-PCC performance coach?
Right, a lot of acronyms there. Yeah. So International Coaching Federation, Professional Coaching Certified, or Professional Coach Certified. What that means is that I've done over 500 one-on-one coaching sessions with my client coachees. And the topics that we work on can include Clifton strengths to help them understand themselves, to sell themselves during an interview, or look at what are their goals, where are they now, where do they want to go, how do we get there. And I've been doing this for over 6 years, coaching and facilitation for over 10 years. And the key thing is we help them to also look at trust and confidence.
Okay. So you guys have the skills to maybe help me dissect this question about how do we have better conversations. But this episode kind of came about because a couple of months ago, I went out on the streets and I interviewed random people, right? And I said, do you think Singaporeans are an angry bunch? What is your take? Agree? Disagree? Okay, Audrey, you're nodding like, yes. What makes you say so?
I feel that Singaporeans have expectations about how things should and should not be. And sometimes the norms and standards may not have been aligned. And therefore, when those norms are not adhered to or broken, there may be feelings of, wow, why like that? Or they should know what. But do they?
It's like you're reading my mind. That's what I always say. Why like that? Yeah, but Sharon, agree?
I don't think I would label Singapore as an angry bunch of people. I think there's some things they could be angrier about. So I don't think we've reached peak appropriate anger.
Anger management 101.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm always like careful about like labeling someone as angry, because I'd rather find out what is it that they're so angry about, or what did they go through, because there are some things that people ought to be angry about, and the anger is a completely healthy expression of it. So to broadly say, oh, Singaporeans are an angry bunch, I don't think so. Yeah.
You said that there are particular things that they might be angry about. Do you have like some examples, do you think?
Okay, so for example, let's just say parents angry about PSLE. I think to some degree it is a justified anger, and yeah, you may disagree about it. You may accept certain things about the PSLE versus a parent who can't accept certain things about the PSLE. But I'm not about to go and tell the parent you have no right to be angry, Are there better ways or better platforms to express that anger? Probably, yeah. But the root of the anger, I think, is worth understanding. Yeah.
So when I look online, I think a lot of what informs my conversation about this is that when I go online, maybe every other particular issue, I find like people are arguing in the comment section, and then it just gets heated. Sometimes get personal. It's like, don't you read the comments? You should. Why you talk like this? You know, it's like it's just like really weird. So
Yeah.
is that format and platform maybe not so conducive to having a conversation, and or does going online encourage conflict in a way? Audrey, what do you think?
For me personally, I go online more as a user rather than as a participant. On, for example, Instagram, I'm just like looking at cute doggy video. Like on Instagram, I'm just looking at cute like dogs and cats videos, for example, just to de-stress. And when I do see heated comments, I just go, oh, interesting that they're feeling that way. And I move on. I don't particularly engage with it. And maybe at the back of it, I kind of ask the question, what are they looking for? Are they actually looking for connection? Are they looking to be seen and heard in a way, even if it can be confrontational?
But I'm kind of interested
Yeah.
to get your point of view about why people actually comment. So most people, probably like you, I mean, I think we'll have the same reaction. If I see something that maybe I don't like, I wouldn't comment.
Yeah.
But what do you think, pushes the person to
Yeah.
make a nasty comment or interact with someone or just, be flippant online? What do you think?
I think there's probably a great deal of reasons, all different. Some people could be doing it because it is a literal spur of the moment thing. I see a thing, I get angry, I express myself. Some people think out loud like that, and maybe online it translates into I immediately type a comment and I forget about the comment. I'm quite sure there's a category of people like that, right? Then there might be a category of people who I am commenting because this is me trying to live out a certain persona or identity that I want to be known in, So I'm sure there's a category of people who are like that. And then there is obviously a category of trolls, right? Where I just like to say things to get a reaction. And the more you react, the more I react, or the more I enjoy myself. And I do know there are people who enjoy that, taking the mickey out of things and seeing how much anger they can inspire. And that's just three. There's probably like even more reasons why people do that. But I find that the interesting thing is to ask yourself why you don't and what might make you do that. Yeah.
Perhaps this is a naive question, but don't they think of the other person? Like when you're typing a negative comment, it goes to someone, right? And I know this because I also manage my own social media, and I can sometimes see when people don't like something I do. And that's fine. Like you don't have to like everything, but why do you have to tell me? Like just leave it. So what do you think convinces someone to actually not think of the other person when they're like typing this kind of comment?
So over online, it's just black and white, right? You're not seeing the face of the person in front of you. You're not able to see or imagine the facial expression of how they would respond when they see that comment. So I think it's easier to put the self first and to forget about maybe showing empathy, kindness, and graciousness to whoever's receiving the comment.
Yeah, I think if we just go with the first three groups that I already described to you, you can see it's not about the other. It is about something going on for me. It's about something stirring in me. It's about something that I would like to provoke. So it's not necessarily about the other person. Like you are inconsequential, You would have to be inconsequential for me to say certain things, Like when you think about let's say news articles of like tragic incidents, right? And when you go on a comment section, you can bet while there are people who are like, oh, let me express my sympathy for it, right? There are also people who would like choose a laughing emoji or choose like now is a good time for me to break out my best pun about a highly inappropriate thing. And you can see it's clearly not about the other person. It's about I just came here to express something in me.
So what does that say about us as a society if we are doing this You know, because you talked about anonymity and it's just a space, right? I mean, so what does it say about us as if we are free to do this?
There was that recent accident along Nicole Highway where there was a car crash and the driver unfortunately perished. And there were some comments that were not very kind about, you know, someone who drives like that deserves what happened. And I'm just wondering, wow, how would it feel to be a family member or extended family member of someone who does know the person to read that kind of comment? And I'm just wondering, do we need to say it? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
No, I was just thinking that the human nature has always been like that, you know? As in we've probably always had inappropriate thoughts. Like, you know, I don't think like there was a time in history where like, oh, you know, we were all amazing until the internet came and now we're corrupt. You know, I do think that the internet, maybe the worst thing it did to us is it gave us a platform where for some reason we believe it is okay and appropriate to now put out my strange thoughts into the world. And when people validate the strange thought with a like or a haha emoji, then I get even more spurred on that this is amazing. I get to say all the weird stuff that's in my brain. And someone out there actually likes it.
Without consequences.
I was just gonna say, because you don't nobody comes to your house and say,
I fine you $10 for that comment that you said.
or you go to jail. Like, you know, because it's so inappropriate. Yeah, but then do we want to become a society where we, you know, sue each other, we make police reports, and there's now this like conduct of carriages on public transport. And and I was like, okay, I'm totally for it, but it's very interesting that we don't speak up against like bad behavior. We just like get angry about it and say, oh, you know, he shouldn't do this, he shouldn't do that. But we never tell the other person like this is inappropriate or like you are affecting me by your behavior. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, right? Yeah. Yeah, Audrey, you were gonna say something?
I think it's interesting whenever we hear ourselves using the word shouldn't or when we tell people you shouldn't. What about changing the shouldn't to maybe they could do something differently, which is a lot more generative than you should not. You should know better. And I mean, yes, we probably won't enjoy, you know, music blasting on a cell phone at high decibels because it does affect the commute experience. And then the question is, do we have the courage to gently go up to someone to just put forth a good request? Like, hey, I'm just wondering, is it okay if you lower down the volume a bit? And of course, brace ourselves for whatever response, right? We may get scolded. At least we tried. Or do we need to tell the bus captain, please stop the car and go tell the person to lower down their volume? You know, do we have the courage to have the conversations that we need to have in that moment? And to, in a way, be the change that we want to see rather than going, that person, so inconsiderate, you know, blah, 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 and share that over dinner with our family members about an inconsiderate passenger we met.
Oh no, I'm guilty. I will text someone and say, oh my God, you know, this auntie is having a loud conversation. I've done it so bad. Oops, that's me.
I would just get up and move 2 carriages down if it really affects me.
I see your point, yeah. I mean, this is how it ends up with fights and then, you know, people getting annoyed and then they like, everybody, and then like, oh, he took me, and then it's like, oh my God, and then, you know, they get into a fight and then people get videoed. And which is the other thing that annoys me because we're such a, if we don't like something, then we take our phone out and like video each other, which is actually quite strange actually to me. And then they upload it thinking like, I just did something great.
It's like, I have evidence of you doing something wrong and I am demonstrating that I'm better than you.
In what sense? How am I better than you if I do that?
That I caught the behavior that is unpalatable and I have evidence to show it, which probably is not exactly a gracious act either.
Yeah, I think the more scary part is, okay, so on one level, we can understand why someone might resort to something like that. Say like, okay, I don't believe I have any other avenues for justice for this terrible thing that I'm witnessing. So let me use the justice of the mob, like, because once I upload it online, then I can use the full force of of social exclusion, or what I hope would inspire social exclusion, right? Because like once you put it up there, then you can bet there'll be like lots of people coming on the comments or like forwarding it and saying like, oh, this person, let's hunt them down, let's dox them, this is terrible. And it's it's like, let me deal with a bad thing by doing a quotation mark bad thing because I feel that the means justifies the end. Yeah. It's about like, because I want justice. Yeah. I will use a unjust method.
I don't know. I really admire the people who are like, yeah, it's all right. Give him chance. He didn't have his morning coffee kind of thing. But where does this sense of like, I need this justice come from in this day and age?
Yeah, but we all have a desire for justice, right? As long as you're a person with, like Audrey said, like expectations and norms and things ought to be this way, things ought not to be this way, right? And as long as we have that, then when someone breaks that
Code of
either
conduct.
obvious or not that obvious code of conduct, there are codes of conduct that, let's say, we all generically think is more obvious. Like if you go into an MRT, you shouldn't, like, I don't know, blast your thing really loudly or like
Or eat.
or eat and spill it on the chair and not clean it up. You can say most people generically understand that's inappropriate, right? And you can bet that 10 people on MRT are all feeling feelings of like injustice, or anger. They may not call it injustice or outrage, but there'll be different levels and different degrees of from mild irritation to complete outrage, depending on how strongly you feel about this value called keep the MRT clean, right? But there's also like less obvious rules, like, I don't know, say like someone has an invisible, strongly held rule about like when we line up, you don't like cut in kind of thing, right? Well, actually, that's a more obvious rule.
Or
But
for example, someone is coughing on the MRT and not wearing a mask. That triggers me. I will stare at them and then go down 2 carriages because I have family members who are immune compromised. So I need to take care to not fall sick and pass it on.
Actually, I feel like you're getting your steps in at the MRT, Every carriage there's someone listening to music, you're like, move down. Then someone coming in, move back. It's like, okay.
Doesn't happen that often, lah.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask about race in Singapore because I feel like that's a very polarizing topic. It could be me because as a minority person, I just hear both sides and I understand it a bit more. Okay, I don't want to say understand a bit more, but I feel like it gets heated when we talk about it. So it's kind of like either you're with me or you're against me. I don't know. Do you guys agree, disagree?
Yeah. No, I agree that this is it's a high stake issue, right? And this is the one where what I mean by there are some, let's say, rules that are a lot more obvious of like, we all ought to be angry about this. And in Singapore, there's definitely a few things that whether we agree or disagree, people feel is grey. For example, blackface, right? Because I see the comments and it's almost like repeat and rinse the same arguments that people are having, right?
Yeah, because every time it happens like at least once a year.
Yeah, so the like blackface incidents, unfortunately, are almost like once a year, and if you look at the comment section, it's basically the same thing. You're going to have like some people saying like, this is like completely outrageous. This is horrible. How can it happen almost every year? And I think it's appropriate that people get angry about it, right? But there's also like a spectrum of from genuine to trolly saying, this is not something worth getting so angry about. Are you being oversensitive? This is like from America. This is not a Singapore thing, but it's basically saying it doesn't deserve, let's say, level 10 anger, And those are the incidents where I think this may not be the best platform to like have to build understanding about why this is inappropriate or appropriate.
You mean on social media?
Yeah, on social media. right? Especially if, let's say, you're someone who is sincere about, I need you to understand why this is like so bad, right? I think it is appropriate and healthy if you feel very strongly about it to maybe write a post on your own like thing about like, this is how strongly I feel about it, right? But I think, say you write that and you submit it under someone else's, let's say, diatribe, right? It's not that it's wrong for you to do it. It's you might not like the response because the person may not, let's say they posted, I don't understand why people are so outraged about it. And then you post like your essay underneath their comment. They are probably thinking, hey, this is me expressing myself, get off my channel. Similarly, if you put your like, I think this is completely inappropriate kind of thing, and someone like posted like a 500-word essay or something about why like you are wrong, I'm not sure either person achieves the outcome you're hoping for. But that's assuming both people wanted a sincere, I want you to understand, you know?
So the next time this happens,
Yeah.
and it will happen,
Yes, it will.
I feel like I should bet some money, but when it happens, how do we have a productive conversation? Because the last incident, I just felt like people were just talking over each other.
Yeah.
And then did I want to wade in? Yes. But there were like so many voices that it was just like, you know what? I'm sitting this one out. I just couldn't deal with it. And I was hearing all the, what's the big deal? And then you just feel like, okay, then my voice doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So the next time when this happens, what do we do?
I would say I completely appreciate the people who felt so strongly, let's say, about the issue, and took the time to write out a piece, a long form piece, right? Where they explained it out a lot more because it's clear the writer wants this to be understood. And I appreciate being able to go online and read those pieces as like a piece of public education, right? From a fellow citizen on the ground, right? If I don't, maybe there are aspects that I didn't see, and now when I read it, I see and I appreciate it. And I may not necessarily like write a comment and say like, wow, this was so amazing, let me like pass it on. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But maybe the invisible effect of people who write this is you're speaking on behalf of people who don't know how to articulate it. You're speaking or you're speaking to the people who would like to learn about it but don't know who is safe to ask. So I think it's perfectly fine for people to use social media to express that in a way that I need you to understand something completely unfair, unjust about this. Yeah, but the whole let's have a little bit of a debate in the comment section, to me, it doesn't necessarily help. I've seen some people do it with some skill, but that takes skill. Most of the time, people who are commenting are not there to be educated. And if you speak to me as if you want to educate me, I'm going to get even angrier. So I don't think the comment section is the best platform for it. Yeah.
Audrey, did you want to add on?
And I like the saying that good questions are better than smart answers. So if I were to contribute something, I just contribute a question to go, I'm just genuinely curious, why would the people who do that think it is funny? And then start a conversation from there. Just to understand more about where are they coming from and what sort of humor do they subscribe to, and is that my standard of humor or do I differ from that? Yeah.
So Sharon, you brought in something about when things like this happen.
Yeah.
It may not just be about blackface per se, but sometimes there is this argument from Singaporeans that the woke crowd is borrowing from the West.
Oh yeah, it's like ridiculous.
I understand it because of what I'm informed by, right? So a lot of my what I listen to or read or watch is from the West. So I understand things like woke or boundaries or safe space. But so when people say, no, this is a Western concept, I mean, I'm like, okay, but it exists. But what do both of you think?
No, I think there obviously is a subculture of people who do adopt, let's say, an American idea, let's just say, or a Western idea, and they use it to express themselves and don't contextualize it to Asia. So I get that if they do that, they may like trigger a reaction of like, hey, this stuff is not even like our culture. It's not even our language, right? So I get that. But what I also don't like is when, let's just call it the other side, decides like, oh, anything that sounds counter to my, let's just say, slightly more conservative leaning views, I will instantly label it as woke or liberal or so Western, when that's not even an appropriate labeling of it, right? And when you do that, that also tells me that you're not that interested in understanding the other person's perspectives. You're not even interested in treating the other person as a person. You just want to put an identity on the other person. You are a woke person, or you're a social justice warrior, and therefore I get to talk to you in a certain way, and I do not need to talk to you in another way because you are that identity. And that I don't like.
So it immediately shuts down the
It
conversation.
immediately shuts down, you know. If I call you like, hey, you're a social justice warrior, you already know where this person is going. Yeah. It's hard to have like an actual conversation once someone decides I see you in one particular identity and you shall be no other things to me. Yeah, that's hard. Yeah. But similarly, the other way around, except I don't know what's the equivalent.
Yeah, I was like thinking about on the flip side, what's the opposite of social justice warrior?
I don't know. I mean, in the Singapore context, like, it's quite odd. You'll be like, you PAP supporter or you OPI. You know?
Or IB. It was like learning
you
this lingo. I was like,
you
what?
know?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I really resonated with Sharon's point about the labels and judgments, opinions, assessments that we have of people. And I just turned the question around to look inward, to ask the question, what are my opinions? What are my assessments? How do I see the world? And therefore, what are the emotions that I feel telling me about who I am and how I see the world? And a lot of those comments actually tells us a lot more about the person than it tells us about us. And also, how we feel when we read those comments tells us a lot about ourselves, not what they have said, because so many people can have different reactions to that same comment, but we respond or feel differently. So I'd say the work really is within, to turn inward and ask ourselves more, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? How does this trigger me? Why does it trigger me? What beliefs do I have that causes this to be so triggering? And to just question that with openness and gentleness.
So, Sharon, you said something very early on in the conversation about anger can be a good thing.
Yes.
How so?
Well, if anger is anger is an appropriate response to the thought that something that I deeply value is being taken away from me, right? Or a boundary that I hold as very important, a standard that I hold as very important is being transgressed, right? So as long as you have boundaries and values and principles, things that you care about, you're always going to get angry about a thing, right? Now, if you're angry every day at every moment to everyone, then it means like, well, maybe it's possible your standards are a little bit like high and
I will tone it down.
and like everywhere, you know. But similarly, if you're on the other extreme where you're a person who never gets angry at everything also, it's okay. Well, then there's a problem there because you don't have any values or principles or standards that you will stand for, right? So that's why I do think it's proper to get angry about things, that there's a spectrum of things that are worth getting angry about. Now, who defines what's worth getting angry about? That's the debate. And we are going to have very different ideas of what is worth getting angry about. Yeah.
Anger is a good thing when it comes to setting boundaries and helping to define what is okay and what's not okay in relationships. What's okay and not okay in how my parents speak to me and I speak to them. in the Asian culture, some parents are like, I'm your parents, I can talk to you however I like. But is that true? There will be a consequence to that kind of behavior, and it can be a distanced adult parent-child relationship, which can lead to sadness down the road if it's not resolved. So I'd say anger, when communicated appropriately, is healthy, and it's actually beneficial to improving the relationship in the long term. But what we want to be mindful of is that the anger doesn't turn into a mood of resentment. It's like that dark cloud that follows a person whenever they go. And when they walk into the room, sometimes you can even see it, behind them. I'd say it's important to not let that... go back. So it's important to be mindful that the emotion of anger doesn't turn into a longer term mood of resentment that we live in, because that mood of resentment then clouds how we see the world. It's like a lens. So if I am living in that mood perpetually, I'll be like, someone took my seat. That person bumped into me.
Yeah.
That person spilled water on me, and everything will just be magnified and amplified through that lens of how we see things, which is not healthy in the long run.
Yeah, like an ongoing mood of resentment is a sign of like missing requests that are not being made, right? And if you want to contextualize it to Singapore, broadly speaking, in our culture, we haven't done a great job teaching each other or teaching our children what does it mean to make an appropriate request. Like, can I come to you with my request? And if I don't feel I have a place to go with my request, right, then I will seek my justice in a completely other form, which may blow back on me, which may not be helpful for me. But no one taught me how to do this better, right? So like, if someone is coughing really, really like horribly in the MRT, I may feel, how do I get my request across?
Death stare.
It's weird to go there and, hey, can I offer you a mask? No one does that, right?
Yeah.
But
I really
elsewhere they
want
do
to.
it. I've seen people do it.
yeah.
Say, would you like a tissue?
And that's an act of kindness, actually.
Yeah, and some people do that really well, even in Singapore. So there's a whole diversity of how people do it, right? And actually that becomes an interesting conversation with friends, right? When you ask them like, hey, like, say this happens in an MRT, what would you do? And if you have a diverse range of friends, you'll be surprised at how different people handle it. And some people are upfront because of the way they are brought up, either through their family, or they are brought up that way because they had a certain friend group, or that's how their workplace taught them to do it. They actually do go up to the person, and in a clear but still very kind way, they make their request known. And yes, they do get blowback from some people who are all defensive, like, are you saying something wrong with me? The trick to also putting your request out there is it has to feel not like attack, I cannot trigger your defensiveness.
It can't be a demand.
It can't be a demand. It can't be like a pagro thing, like, hey, do you want a mask? And then I give you my death stare, right? Then the person can read between their lines. We're all very good at reading between the lines. Like, what are you trying
to say?
As long as you give me the vibe that you are trying to tell me there's something wrong with you, I will get defensive. I will get aggressive. So it is tough. It does take courage to put our requests out there. But what I'm hopeful for is the more we dare to do that, we will get more good responses than like icky responses, let's just say.
I think the operative word that you said was kind. And I think sometimes our brain doesn't automatically start there, right? It's like, oh my God, this person's irritating me, so let me just deal with it in that irritated manner, right?
Yeah.
So I read this quote somewhere that every person we meet is either unconsciously perpetuating whatever beliefs that we have learned in that cycle, or doing the hard work of breaking it. And I think, and I feel hopeful that if we actually learn the vocabulary of emotions, we learn to make those necessary requests in a timely manner, when we change, our family will notice the change and they will be more open to the change as well. And in the Asian culture, especially the elders, it's hard for them to make that request because of face. And then there's that implicit expectation that you ought to know. You ought to read my mind. You ought to know what filial piety means. There's a whole range of definition of that. And need to ask. You should know, right? And then it's up to us to actually not be triggered and start shouting back and to actually say, I'm sorry, I really can't read your mind. Could you let me know what you would have liked to happen? I will make sure to take note of it and I will do my best to do as you please or do as you request to the best of my ability in the future. And that's a conversation that shifts the trajectory of that relationship.
I think that's a very good script. I'm going to steal it and use it. I feel like it will come unnaturally at first, but I think it's about practice also, right? It's like you just get there and then, over time you just get into that mode, right?
I had a really bad relationship with my mom. And I just want to say I have seen what it's like for a woman in her 60s to shift her narrative of resentment to one of more openness and gentleness. So it is possible.
By you doing that, as in asking for what she needs and then...
Well, long story short, I went through my own unlearning. My mom went through her own grieving process of losing my grandfather. And that grief actually opened up sadness, which then opened up gentleness, actually. And that led to the process of healing. And the process of healing led to her just looking at all the narratives that she's had about herself, about being the middle child, about being the daughter in the family, about being not good enough. And then she learned to realize that, actually, when someone says something, it's just that. But she hears it as, therefore, I'm not good enough. And when we go through that healing process, we hear and see things differently. And maybe there's less value judgment attached to something objective. And long story short, I'd say it's possible for us to grow and heal at any stage that we are, as long as there's a genuine willingness and openness to.
How do we encourage people to be more open to engaging with perspectives that they may not immediately agree with? Like, what is one thing that they can do?
I would say, don't make the stranger the first go-to place where let me work this out, It is maybe harder, but more meaningful and more fruitful if you begin with those near you. And that could be a colleague, could be a friend, could be a spouse, because you'll be surprised at how there's so many different standards that you already have, So, for example, me and my husband, we don't normally talk about politics, social political issues on date night, or I try not to because I know there are particular issues where we both have quite different views. And the last thing I want is to feel irritated at you, it's like, because in a way, it's not super important to me that you're on the same page with this issue with me, right? But there was one date night where I can't even remember what was the trigger point. And I could go with my normal reaction of okay, I don't want to talk about this because it's just going to make me irritated. Instead, I decided, let's try this thing that I heard of where for 10 minutes, let me ask you to share with me 10 minutes your view on this thing, which I know normally I wouldn't make time and space to hear. You have 10 minutes to just share it because I want to hear it. And my only job is to listen and ask questions. And not hidden opinion questions, but ask questions that are there to help me understand more, right? And when we did that, that was really wonderful for me, right? And wonderful for him too, because it was wonderful for me because in 10 minutes, someone can actually go fairly deep into the reasons why they think a certain thing about a certain issue. right? And I never heard certain aspects of why he would think like that, or actually catching me up on where he is on the issue, because people change every day. People change all the time. And because I gave 10 minutes of protected, I'm not going to put my view in kind of thing, it allowed him the safety to just unpack it. And the other like rule I put in place is after that, I must wrap it up with, thank you for sharing. This is what I got from it.
So you kind of like summarize what you got out of it.
Yes. It's like, and this is what I got, or this is what I've learned about you because of that. And then the person gets to do the same. So the date night ended up being like, let's swap 10 minutes, right? And the rule of, so we made it like a game, and I've since then called the game like from hard to hard, like let's play the hard to hard game. And it's we can either like ask each other to talk about this issue that I never hear you talk about, or talk about an issue that usually is really, really hard for us to talk about. And for fun, we made it about like social stuff or political stuff, not so much like our relationship stuff, but it totally can be applied there as well. And I think it's important because it teaches us that sometimes our anger or irritation or frustration with the other person sometimes has a lot more to do with us not holding ourselves back enough to hear what is the, let's say, the level 1 to 10 kind of like things that the person is thinking through. We only hear the level 1, then we instantly get angry already. Whereas like once you hear like the 2, 3, 4, 5, the levels underneath, you would get a more complete picture of where this person truly is at. Yeah.
Okay, that's me at level 1.
I love it. I'm going to borrow that for date night.
It's a great date night thing. Yeah.
Okay, I heard you, right? I think that's a very good suggestion. And we can do it with anyone, right? It's not just a partner that you...
you got to do it with
friend.
someone who doesn't mind doing this with you. Probably not in person on the internet.
Okay, try it with someone. Audrey, what was your, the one actionable thing that people can do if they are hearing a perspective that they don't like? And how do they engage with it?
I'd say to take a deep breath, take a step back, physically, metaphorically, and just ask, why do I not like what they're saying? How does it differ from my beliefs and principles? And are there any similarities? If there are, I'd start from the similarities. It's harder to feel combative against someone when you find more similarities with them. And then the second layer I'd ask is, to what degree is this close to my heart that I feel like I need to do something or say something about it to them? If they're a stranger passing by, it's okay, I probably won't meet them ever again, If it's someone that's close to me, like a family member or like a spouse, I'd just say a quick prayer for them. And at the end of the day, I think it's just for the sake of what? Why do I need to get upset? And can I choose another emotion to feel towards them instead of anger?
So thank you both for coming on the show. That was all I wanted to ask. I think there are a lot of takeaways that we can use in everyday life. So if you liked watching this episode, tell me what you think in the comment section, but practice what we learn. So if you're watching this episode on YouTube, like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell to get fresh content. Now you can also catch the usual plays on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the ST app. I'll see you next time.